They say the Emperor protects, but who protects those he no longer needs? The battlefield stretches endlessly, a continent of ash and bone. The sun, if it can be called that, bleeds through the storm clouds, its light fractured by smoke and dust. Beneath it, the wounded crawl. Limbs half gone, lungs burning with promethium fumes, eyes staring at the indifferent heavens. These are not the dead. Not yet. These are the forgotten sons of the Imperium, soldiers who have given everything and yet remain unclaimed by either mercy or death. In the far future, war never ends. It only mutates, devouring flesh and faith alike. Every battle fought in the name of the Emperor leaves behind a trail of the broken, guardsmen gasping in the mud of hive worlds, sisters of battle clutching shattered relics, Astartes bleeding ichor black as oil. And though the Imperium sings of honor, duty, and eternal service, few speak of what happens after the charge ends, after the banners burn, after the screaming stops. A guardsman lies amid the wreckage of his regiment. His name has already been lost to record. A shard of shrapnel has pierced his side. His lasgun lies meters away, useless. Around him, Vox units crackle with prayers and static. He cannot see the enemy, only the silhouettes of medici servitors, their mechanical limbs twitching through the haze. Their syringes hiss with coagulants and amnesia serums, their saws glinting wet in the dying light. One pauses over him, its optical sensors focusing. It does not ask his name or his rank. It simply measures the wound. The data returns. Repairable. Inefficient. The servitor turns away. He reaches out, whispering a plea to the Emperor, to anyone. But the machine has already moved on, stepping over him toward those whose flesh might still serve. His vision fades. The air grows cold. Then, through the ringing in his ears, he hears the hymn of the ecclesiarchy, faint, solemn, carried on the wind. He smiles, thinking perhaps salvation has come, but the hymn is not for him. It is for the dead, already gathered and stacked for the pyres. Across the galaxy, on a void ship drifting through the warp, another kind of wounded lies in darkness. An Astartes, a warrior of legend, floats within a sarcophagus of sacred machinery. His armor is shattered, his body a ruin of fused bone and synthetic muscle. Tech priests chant in binary, their voices hollow like the language of ghosts. They will not let him die, for an Astartes is property of the chapter, a weapon too valuable for the grave. Cables pierce his spine. Holy oils anoint his skull. The sarcophagus seals, entombing him in eternal darkness. In that moment, the warrior ceases to be a man. He becomes a dreadnought, a prison of metal and memory, doomed to awaken only in times of war, to dream of battles long gone, to feel the ghost of pain in limbs he no longer possesses. For some, it is an honor. For others, a curse beyond comprehension. On shrine worlds, the wounded are revered as martyrs. Their broken bodies paraded through the streets, adorned with purity seals and incense smoke. Pilgrims reach out to touch their bandaged flesh, believing it brings them closer to the Emperor's light. But beneath the hymns and gold lies a quieter truth. Once the parades end, once the faith fades, many of these heroes are left to rot in forgotten hospitals built from rust and prayer. There, medica sisters tend to thousands, feeding them through tubes, whispering benedictions to those who can no longer move. Each breath a tithe of pain, each heartbeat another act of devotion. Not all are so fortunate. On feral worlds where the Imperium's reach is little more than myth, wounded soldiers are abandoned where they fall. There are no apothecaries, no hospitals, only the endless wilderness and the carrion beasts that follow war like a second army. Some crawl back to their settlements, worshipping their scars as proof of the Emperor's favor. Others vanish into the wastes, becoming legends whispered around campfires. Ghost soldiers, forever fighting battles no one remembers. And then there are the apothecaries of the Astartes, the surgeons of the demigods. When a brother falls, they do not mourn as men do. They harvest. The gene seed, the sacred legacy of their primarch, is cut from the corpse with reverence. The body is burned, the ashes scattered on the wind. But sometimes the brother still breathes. Sometimes he begs for the emperor's mercy. And still the scalpel descends. The mission, the chapter, the Imperium, they come before all else. Even among the sisters of battle, mercy is a blade honed on duty. Those who can no longer fight are not always granted rest. Some are reforged as living icons, their shattered bodies bound into relic engines, their voices woven into the choirs of the penitent. Their pain becomes worship. Their screams become hymns. They are living reminders of sacrifice, a warning to those who would doubt the faith's price. On the worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus, pain is neither holy nor tragic. It is inefficient. The wounded are repaired, augmented, or discarded. Flesh is weakness. Metal is salvation. A soldier who loses an arm may gain a servo limb. One who loses a heart may receive a mechanical replacement that never falters. But as the augmentations multiply, so too does the silence. The soul recedes, replaced by the cold logic of steel. They survive, but they no longer live as they once did. And yet, perhaps the most haunting fate awaits those who are neither healed nor slain, those whose wounds are not of flesh, but of faith, the silent ones, the empty-eyed veterans who return from the front lines only to find no place for themselves in the Imperium they fought for. They wander hive streets cloaked in tattered uniforms, muttering catechisms to gods that no longer listen. Some join redemptionist cults, seeking absolution through flame. Others vanish into the underhive, their names erased by the bureaucracy of a million worlds. One such man sits beneath a flickering lumen globe on Vordrast Hive. His metals are rusted, his leg replaced with scrap augmetics that whir with every movement. He does not sleep. Every night he hears the screams again, not of the enemy, but of his comrades, the ones left behind. The Emperor's statue looms over him from 1,000 meters above, its stone eyes weeping with acid rain. He looks up, whispers, "Did you forget us too?" The wind answers with silence. But not all who are broken remain so. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, some are given another chance, though mercy is not the word for it. The Inquisition, ever watchful, recruits from the ranks of the damaged. A soldier missing an arm may become an assassin wielding a blade of faith. A crippled pilot may serve as the neural core of a gunship. A dying psyker may be chained within the black ships, their screams fueling the Astronomicon itself. They are kept alive not for compassion, but for utility. For in the Imperium, life is a resource, and pain is a tool. Still, there are whispers of ships that drift through the void carrying the forgotten, vessels known as mercy hulks, ancient hospital ships that once served the Crusades but were left to decay. Their decks echo with the groans of the half-dead, their halls lined with rusting stasis pods. The crew are ghosts, the medici long dead, yet the machinery still functions, guided by fragmented AIs that no longer remember their purpose. Some say these ships appear near war zones, collecting the wounded before vanishing into the warp. Others claim they are cursed, harvesting souls for some dark experiment. Whether these tales are true or not, one truth remains eternal. In the Imperium of man, suffering is not an accident. It is a design, a sacred engine that keeps the faith burning when hope is long extinguished. To bleed is to serve. To suffer is to believe. And to die is to be remembered if only for a moment before the next war begins. But somewhere in a forgotten system beyond sanctioned charts, a Vox beacon has begun to transmit. Its signal carries the Medicae sigil of the early Crusade era, a mark that should have been extinct for millennia. The transmission repeats endlessly. We have survivors. Coordinates locked, requesting retrieval. Yet the signal is wrong. The voice within is not human. The Imperium listens, and what they hear will shake the faith of men and machine alike. The wounded still wait, and perhaps they have learned to hate the ones who left them behind. The signal had been repeating for 79 standard hours. Across the void, astropaths strained beneath the psychic pressure, their eyes bleeding as they translated the impossible message. An ancient Medici code, unchanged since the early Great Crusade. No one used that language anymore. No one should have. Within the command sanctum of the imperial vessel Gloria Invictus, Lord Militant Serath watched the transmission pulse across the hololith. Each syllable felt like a whisper through the marrow of the ship. Around him, the air was thick with incense and static. Tech priests murmured prayers to the machine spirit. The Vox repeated once more. "We have survivors. Coordinates locked, requesting retrieval." Serath's voice was low, deliberate. No record exists of any Medici detachment in that sector. His adjutant, a scarred veteran of the Vortan campaigns, nodded uneasily. "Then what are we retrieving, my lord?" Serath did not answer. Some questions in the Imperium were better left unspoken. When the fleet arrived at the coordinates, there was no planet, no station, no sign of life. Only a drifting hulk, immense cathedral-like, its hull carved with symbols of the early Crusades. The name, half buried beneath corrosion, read Sanctus Aeternum. A mercy hulk. Forgotten for over 10,000 years. Boarding parties entered through ruptured docking bays where frozen corpses floated like relics. The air was stale, filled with the faint hum of forgotten hymns. Vox records crackled faintly through the ship's echoing corridors. Medici Deck Alpha, requesting retrieval. Then silence. Serath's command squad advanced with weapons raised. Auspec's readings flickered, confused. Countless life signatures, faint, but everywhere, and yet the corridors were empty. They found the first of the wounded near the apothecarian. Rows of stasis caskets, cracked and frost-rimed. Inside them lay the half-dead. Guardsmen, Astartes, sisters, all from wars older than the Imperium itself. Some bore armor markings long erased from history. Others still breathed, impossibly, their chests rising in slow rhythm, preserved by machines that should have failed millennia ago. A servitor stirred, its face a melted ruin. Patient status, critical, awaiting retrieval. Its voice trembled, looping endlessly. The soldiers stared. None spoke. The dead were speaking through machines that had forgotten death. In the lower decks they found shrines built from bone and Medici tubing, IV lines woven into rosaries, scalpel blades turned into icons. A priest's journal lay open on a rusted altar, the words smeared by age. "We cannot reach the Emperor. The light has abandoned us. The wounded still dream, and the dreams whisper his name, but not in praise." An uneasy silence fell over the team. Meanwhile, orbiting above the derelict, an ecclesiarchal observer recited the Litany of Preservation. His name was Confessor Mailer, and he had been sent to ensure the mission's purity. Watching from the sanctified bridge, he crossed himself. "Mercy hulks were forbidden for a reason," he whispered. "There is no mercy without control." Deep within Sanctus Aeternum, the Medici systems reactivated. Syringes clicked, monitors pulsed with long-dead heartbeats, and then a whisper through the Vox. "Emperor, why did you leave us?" Serath froze. The voice was human, broken, filled with centuries of decay. "Identify yourself," he demanded. No answer, only static, and the faint sound of someone breathing on the other end. The squad pressed deeper into the ship. They reached the central healing chamber, or what remained of it. Dozens of wounded floated in nutrient vats, suspended between life and death. Tubes entered their throats, skulls, and hearts. Their eyes followed the soldiers as they passed, alive but unmoving. One of them, a sister of battle, armor corroded to green-black, turned her head slightly and whispered through the liquid. We prayed, and no one came. The Medici servitors stirred violently. Their programming recognized outsiders. Their surgical arms unfolded, dripping with sacred oils and blood. A mechanical voice intoned, "Retrieval in progress, reclamation of service." Last fire erupted. The servitors advanced without fear, chanting catechisms corrupted by time. The corridors burned with muzzle flashes and incense smoke. Through the chaos, Serath saw the wounded rising from their vats, dragging themselves free, their flesh half machine, half rot. "We have waited," they cried. "We are still his soldiers." When the guns fell silent, half the squad was gone. The wounded had vanished into the dark. Only the echo of their voices remained, whispering prayers in languages older than the Imperium. Confessor Maelor ordered the hulk purged by fire. "There can be no salvation in corruption," he declared. But Serath hesitated. Among the data recovered from the ship's cogitators was a sealed file, marked by the sigil of the Emperor himself, used only during the Unification Wars. The file contained reports from the earliest Crusades, field notes of Medici officers who had witnessed miraculous survivals, soldiers who refused to die, whose bodies regenerated beyond reason, who spoke with voices not their own. The Emperor had ordered them sealed aboard Mercy hulks, to be studied, not destroyed. "They were his chosen," Maelor whispered, horrified, "and he abandoned them." Weeks passed. The Gloria Invictus carried the remains of Sanctus Aeternum back toward Imperial space. But something lingered in the ship's systems. Faint echoes, ghostly prayers transmitted through the Vox at random intervals. Crewmen reported dreams of pale figures standing beside their beds, whispering, "You left us behind." In the lower decks, Medici servitors began malfunctioning. Some started performing surgeries on themselves, rearranging their limbs into forms that made no sense. Others began to chant names that matched the wounded aboard the Mercy hulk. Serath sought counsel from Maelor, but the priest had changed. His sermons had become fevered, his eyes alight with unnatural conviction. "Perhaps," Maelor whispered, "they are the Emperor's true inheritors, those who suffer eternally in his name." The Lord, militant, recoiled. "You speak heresy." Maelor smiled. "Or revelation. What is the difference when both come from pain?" That night, the ship's Geller field flickered. For 11 seconds, reality screamed. When order returned, the lights dimmed and the walls dripped with oil and blood. The wounded had returned, or something wearing their shapes. They moved through the corridors without sound, touching the living and filling them with a calm, terrible understanding. Serath armed the self-destruct, but when he reached the core, he found Maelor already there, kneeling before the glowing machine. "You cannot destroy them," the confessor said softly. "They are proof that he still watches. They have seen the Emperor," and he wept. Serath raised his weapon. "You've lost your faith." Maelor looked up, tears of black oil streaking his face. "No, I found it." He pressed his hand to the detonator, but instead of explosion, the ship's engines roared to life. The Gloria Invictus turned from its course toward Holy Terra and plunged into the warp, guided by coordinates buried in the Mercy hulk's memory. On the bridge, chaos erupted. The navigator screamed as his third eye burned out. Vox units spat out fragments of the same ancient transmission. "We have survivors." Over and over, until the words became a chorus. Days passed, or centuries. In the warp, time is meaningless. Some crew turned to prayer, others to madness. The wounded appeared among them, teaching hymns that spoke of an emperor not as a god, but as a man who once knew compassion, and lost it. Serath held on as long as he could. In the command sanctum, he recorded his final message. "If anyone finds this, know that the Emperor's mercy is real, but not for us. We found those he left behind. And they remember. The ship re-emerged above a dead world, its surface pocked with the ruins of cathedrals and cities long consumed by dust. The Gloria Invictus descended into orbit. Vox intercepts from nearby systems reported the ship transmitting a new signal, stronger, clearer than before. We have survivors. We have become his mercy. Within the ecclesiarchy, the news spread like contagion. Some denounced it as Zeno's trickery. Others whispered that it was a sign, proof that the emperor's will extended beyond death itself. Pilgrims began vanishing from shrine worlds, drawn by dreams of golden light and distant voices calling them to the sanctuary of the wounded. On Terra, the High Lords ordered silence. The Mechanicus quarantined entire sectors. But still, the signal spread, through Vox, through faith, through dreams. The Imperium trembled beneath the weight of its own doubt. And then, something answered. Not from the stars, but from within the Astronomicon itself. For a moment, the holy beacon flickered. Astropaths screamed as they heard a voice within the light, soft, mournful, human. I never left them. The transmission cut. Across the Imperium, silence fell. Some wept. Some prayed. Some, for the first time in 10,000 years, questioned. And deep within the warp, 1,000 mercy hulks awoke. Lights flared within their broken hulls. Stasis pods hissed open. The wounded stepped forth, not as men nor as angels, but as something in between. They had waited long enough. Now they would show the galaxy what the Emperor's mercy truly meant. It began with the silence. Not the silence of peace, but of suffocation, the kind that settles after the last hymn dies, when even faith forgets how to speak. Across the stars, the Astronomicon flickered like a dying flame, its light shuddering through the void. Navigators felt it first, a tremor, a quiver in the divine current that had guided mankind for 10 millennia. For the first time in living memory, the Imperium felt lost. In the cathedrals of Terra, the High Lords convened in panic. The Emperor's light had faltered for 11 seconds, and in those 11 seconds, entire fleets vanished into the warp, as if swallowed by a living void. Pilgrim worlds screamed into the void, begging for guidance, but no answers came. And then, faintly, through the choir of astropaths, another signal returned, the voice from the mercy hulks. We have become his mercy. It spread like contagion. At first, whispered only among the faithful, then among the dying, the desperate, the forgotten. The wounded who had once been discarded now heard the call as though it were written in their blood. Shrines began to change. Statues of the Emperor weeping golden tears, frescoes shifting to depict not divine judgment, but suffering redeemed. In the lower hives, people prayed not to the God Emperor enthroned in gold, but to the merciful one, the Emperor who bled, who remembered, who still walked among his broken children. The ecclesiarchy declared it blasphemy. Thousands were executed in the squares of holy Terra. But for every heretic burned, 10 more whispered the forbidden creed. Mercy is the true faith. On the edge of Segmentum Obscurus, the first war began. Planet Sanctigria, a shrine world once devoted to the cult of the throne, erupted in civil strife. The priests demanded purity. The pilgrims demanded compassion. Soldiers of the Astra Militarum turned their guns on their own clergy. The sky burned with orbital bombardments, the seas boiled, and through the smoke, both sides claimed to fight in his name. In the ruins of Sanctegria's Grand Basilica, a wounded guardsman crawled toward the altar. His legs were gone, his veins filled with the metallic tang of medici fluids. He reached for the statue of the Emperor, cracked and bleeding marble. "Why did you let this happen?" he whispered. And the statue, impossibly, wept blood that smelled of incense. In that moment, the man saw not a god, but a figure in armor, ancient, human, weary. A voice spoke within his skull. I did not abandon you. You abandoned mercy. He screamed until his voice broke. Across the galaxy, visions spread like wildfire. Battle sisters awoke from dreams of the Emperor kneeling beside the wounded, washing their feet in blood. Tech priests heard binary hymns describing compassion as a machine's first law. Even space marines, those whose faith was forged in war, reported dreams they could not explain. The feeling of hands upon their armor, not to command, but to forgive. The Inquisition moved swiftly. Dozens of orders purged entire worlds, burning every whisper of the merciful creed. But the more they killed, the louder the silence became. On the world of Perditus IX, an entire regiment of the Imperial Guard laid down their arms mid-battle, refusing to fire upon civilians. Their commander, Colonel Vereen, declared, "If mercy is heresy, then heresy is holiness." She was executed within the hour, but her soldiers sang hymns as they burned. Within the warp, something shifted. The tides calmed. Demons grew restless. Some whispered that the wounded who had returned, those reborn aboard the Mercy Hulks, had begun to shape reality itself. They called themselves the Redeemed. They did not fight for the Imperium, nor against it. They moved quietly from world to world, healing the maimed, raising the fallen, and whispering words that made even inquisitors tremble. The Emperor was never a god. He was a man who pitied gods. When word reached Terra that the Gloria Invictus had reappeared in orbit over Ophelia Even, the heart of the ecclesiarchy, panic turned to dread. The ship hung in silence for days, its hull glowing with faint sigils that no one could translate. Then, without warning, it began to broadcast across every Vox channel in the system. The message was not words, but sound, the rhythm of a human heartbeat, slow and steady. And beneath it, a voice, faint, layered, as if thousands spoke through one throat. Do you remember pain? For those who heard it, madness and revelation walked hand in hand. Priests tore out their own eyes, claiming to see his tears. Soldiers knelt mid-battle, laying down their arms. The Adeptus Mechanicus, fascinated and terrified, dissected the transmission and found embedded within it an ancient genetic code, one matching the Emperor's own biological pattern. The implication shattered everything. If the voice was genuine, then the Emperor was not silent, but he was changing, evolving, or breaking. No one could tell which. Some claimed his light had been split, one part still burning in the Golden Throne, another reborn within the wounded. The God Emperor, fractured across time, manifesting both as divinity and as humanity's guilt. On Mars, the Fabricator General convened the Magi to interpret the signal's machine code counterpart. What they found was blasphemy to the Mechanicus, an instruction sequence suggesting that suffering itself could generate psychic energy, pure enough to fuel the Astronomicon without sacrifice. A new calculus of faith, one Magos murmured before being executed. But the idea had already taken root. Meanwhile, the Imperium's front lines began to falter. Whole crusades collapsed as troops deserted to follow the Redeemed. The Inquisition turned inward, purging itself in paranoia. Ordo Hereticus accused Ordo Malleus of corruption. Ordo Xenos accused them both of blind faith. No one could tell who still served the Emperor and who served the Mercy. In the midst of this, Confessor Mailer, now transformed, his flesh scarred by warp light, appeared once more, leading the Redeemed across the burning ruins of Ophelia VII. His voice echoed through the smoke. You made faith into a weapon. You made mercy into weakness. But the Emperor suffers with the wounded. He suffers still. From orbit, the ecclesiarchal fleet opened fire. The bombardment reduced entire continents to glass. Yet, when the smoke cleared, Mailer still stood. Not man, not demon, something in between. His eyes burned with pale gold, his shadow stretching like a crucifix of light. He hears us now, he whispered, before vanishing in a storm of light that split the sky. After that day, things changed. The Astronomicon flared to life again, but its glow was colder, fractured as though divided between two sources. Warp travel stabilized, but the psychic hum that guided ships no longer felt divine. It felt human. And then came the visions, not just to psychers but to ordinary men and women. Farmers saw angels made of scars. Soldiers saw battlefields turn to gardens in the blink of an eye. On dying worlds, the dead rose not to fight, but to forgive. For a moment, the galaxy forgot what it meant to hate, but peace in the Imperium is heresy. Within months, the High Lords declared a new crusade, the purgation of the false mercy. Whole sectors burned. The redeemed vanished, retreating into the warp itself. But before they disappeared, they left behind one final message, burned into the psychic ether. When the throne breaks, we will return, and he will rise not as a god, but as a man who remembers pain. On Terra, deep beneath the imperial palace, the custodians guarding the golden throne began to hear something they had never heard before. Between the mechanical roars and the endless hum of the life-sustaining machines, there was a faint, rhythmic sound. A heartbeat. Slow. Relentless. One custodian dared to lean closer, placing his ear to the adamantium casing of the throne. For a moment he felt warmth. Human warmth. Then a whisper. They are coming home. He fell to his knees. "My Emperor," he gasped. "What have you done?" The light of the Astronomicon flared again, brighter than ever before, and for a single heartbeat, every living soul in the Imperium heard the same voice. Some called it prophecy. Others called it the end. Mercy is not forgiveness. Mercy is remembrance. Then the light fractured into 1,000 rays, streaking across the galaxy like falling stars. Each ray struck a world, a shrine, a soldier, awakening something long buried. The wounded who had once lain forgotten rose once more. Their bodies burned with holy fire. Their eyes wept golden blood. And in that instant, the Imperium understood. The Emperor had never ascended. He had descended. Into the wounded, into the broken, into the hearts of those who had been left behind. The age of gods was ending. The age of mercy had begun. And somewhere within the silent halls of the Golden Throne, the Emperor of mankind opened his eyes. The galaxy bled, not with fire alone, but with faith turned inward, faith devouring itself. The Astronomicon's divided light burned unevenly across the void, casting twin shadows, one golden and holy, the other pale and sorrowful. Ships lost their way between them, caught between salvation and something that felt uncomfortably human. No one could tell anymore where the Emperor's will ended and mercy began. On the world of Celadorn, soldiers marched through rain that smelled of iron and incense. The ground was black glass, melted from orbital bombardments. Chaplains shouted litanies to keep the troops from faltering, but their voices cracked beneath the weight of doubt. Some soldiers carried icons, others only memories. In their hearts, each wondered if dying for a divided God still meant dying for truth. A sister of battle named Seraphine knelt beside a ruined shrine, her armor scorched, her faith trembling. The relic before her, once the image of the Emperor triumphant, now showed a man bent in sorrow. She touched the cracked marble, her gauntlet trembling. "If you are mercy," she whispered, "then forgive me for what I must do." When she rose, her tears had burned away, leaving only resolve. Above her, the fleet prepared to fire upon the planet below, the first world openly devoted to the redeemed. Its surface glowed with lights, not of war, but of hospitals, refugee camps, and sanctuaries. Civilians gathered in prayer circles, not for conquest, but for healing. Yet to the Imperium, compassion without command was rebellion. Seraphine watched from orbit as the orders came down. Her voice joined the choir of thousands repeating the battle hymn, but in her heart she sang a different prayer. Let them not suffer as we did. When the bombardment began, the light from the redeemed's temples rose to meet it, not in defense, but in surrender. The beams intertwined, like two halves of a broken halo. The resulting explosion was neither holy nor profane, only silent, a silence so profound it echoed across the void. For days, the planet glowed faintly, as though mourning itself. In the high palace of Terra, the High Lords argued before the throne. They spoke of order, of heresy, of control. None dared mention the word mercy, but behind their arguments lay a deeper terror. Reports from the custodian guard that the Emperor's body had begun to change. His eyes, sealed for millennia, now glimmered faintly beneath the golden mask. Tech priests reported fluctuations in the life support mechanisms. Something inside the throne was stirring, no longer content with immortality. Beneath the surface, among the catacombs where forgotten saints and martyrs were entombed, pilgrims gathered in secret. They prayed to the merciful Emperor, lighting candles shaped like broken swords. Their whispers filled the stone halls, a chorus of defiance wrapped in reverence. "He is coming," they said, "not as light but as flesh." On the forge world of Mechas Prime, the Adeptus Mechanicus faced schism. Some magi began to convert their bodies into living shrines for the wounded, mechanical saints of compassion, while others saw only blasphemy. Skitarii legions turned upon one another, their metal feet striking sparks from the blood-soaked forges. Binary hymns clashed across the data streams, one proclaiming perfection through suffering, the other through obedience. The sound of it was like a choir screaming in code. Through it all, the redeemed moved unseen. They were neither human nor divine, their flesh healed by warp-born grace, their eyes reflecting the pain of centuries. Wherever they walked, the dying rose, the wounded spoke, and the faithful wept. But their presence brought ruin as often as peace. Armies laid down their arms, worlds fell into anarchy. To some, they were miracles. To others, contagion. Among them walked Confessor Mailer, his form half-shrouded in golden mist. He no longer preached. He listened. Each voice, each prayer, each curse became part of him. "The Imperium burns because it cannot imagine forgiveness," he murmured to a child whose village had been bombarded. "But mercy is a fire of its own." The child asked him, "Will the Emperor come back?" Maelor's eyes dimmed. He never left. That is the tragedy. Far from Terra, in the black gulf between stars, a space marine cruiser drifted in silence. Its name was Vigilant Oath, its crew fractured by faith. In the chapel, Captain Leontis knelt before the Aquila. His armor was scarred, his hand trembled as he removed his helm. "I have killed for him without question," he whispered, "but if he suffers, have I been killing his reflections all along?" His chaplain stood behind him, chains of purity draped across his chest. "Faith is not comfort, brother," he said. "Faith is the wound that never heals." But when the next battle came, Leontis ordered his guns to fire not on the redeemed, but on the fleet that commanded him. For an instant, across the void, two imperial banners faced each other, both bearing the Emperor's sigil. One for vengeance, one for mercy. The first volley shattered the illusion of unity. The second ended the pretense of control. The Imperium was now at war with itself. Inquisitors called it the Great Schism of Light. Worlds burned in his name, temples fell, and 1,000 interpretations of the Emperor bloomed like toxic flowers. Some claimed his mercy was corruption. Others believed his wrath was illusion. Even demons paused in their eternal hunger, watching the Imperium devour its own soul. In the dream labs of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, psychers began to hear a new song. Not the scream of the warp, but a low hum. Mournful, human, almost kind. They called it the Lament of the Throne. Its melody carried through the immaterium, reaching even the ears of chaos itself. The ruinous powers stirred uneasily, for they recognized the sound. It was not worship, it was forgiveness. And forgiveness had no place in their dominion. On Terra, the custodians watched as the golden machinery of the throne began to shudder. Sparks rained from ancient conduits. The air was thick with ozone and prayer. One among them, Captain Helion, approached the dais, his voice trembling. "My lord, the Imperium bleeds. Your silence is killing them." The chamber trembled. For a moment he thought he heard a sigh, the breath of something awakening from endless pain. Outside, the sky of Terra cracked with thunder, though no storm touched its atmosphere. Across the imperial palace, statues wept, relics glowed, and the great banners of the Aquila began to smolder. The adepts fled. The faithful fell to their knees. The heartbeat that once echoed faintly beneath the throne now thundered like a war drum. In orbit, fleets formed uneasy alliances. Loyalists and redeemed ships shared silent proximity, neither daring to fire, both waiting. Every sensor array in the Sol system recorded the same impossible reading. A surge of energy from beneath the palace, vast enough to register as a newborn star. The Emperor's light was changing again, condensing, focusing. Not outward, but inward. Seraphine, now leading a contingent of exiled sisters, stood upon Luna's surface, watching Terra's skies ignite. "Is this his will?" one of her warriors asked. Seraphine's gaze did not waver. "No," she said quietly. "It's his grief." In the warp, something ancient shifted. The Sea of Souls recoiled as though reality itself feared what was coming. Demons screamed as their essence flickered. Some vanished entirely, devoured by a power older than chaos, a sorrow too pure to corrupt. And still the light built within the throne, pulsing faster, each beat echoing across the galaxy. On dying worlds, the redeemed stopped moving, lifting their faces toward the stars. On battlefields, soldiers froze mid-charge, hearing a voice within their hearts. "Remember me not as I was, but as I am." The custodians sealed the inner sanctum. No one would enter, no one would leave. The High Lords sent orders to destroy the palace if necessary, to contain whatever was awakening, but the order never reached them. Vox lines failed. The Astronomicon screamed. The last transmission from the throne chamber was a single line, whispered through static. "Forgive them." Then, silence. Not the silence of endings, but the silence before everything begins again. Every world, every ship, every soul paused. The galaxy itself seemed to draw breath. The light from Terra expanded, swallowing stars, washing through void and warp alike. In that frozen moment, mercy and wrath became indistinguishable. And somewhere, within that blinding convergence of faith and fire, the Emperor of mankind opened his hand. The storm had come, but the world had not yet seen what it would leave behind. Terra burned with light, not fire, not sun, but something deeper, the kind of brilliance that devoured shadows and left only truth. Across the galaxy, transmission screens flared white before collapsing into static. Warp storms froze in silence, as if even the Immaterium had forgotten how to scream. For one breathless moment, every soul in the Imperium, sinner, saint, soldier, felt the same thing. He is awake. The throne shattered, not in destruction, but in revelation. Golden machinery melted like wax, conduits pulsing with the blood of stars. The custodians knelt as molten light poured from the cracks, and within that radiance stood a figure, not a god, not quite a man. His face was hidden beneath shadow, but his voice was everywhere. "You have built your faith upon my silence," he said, "and now my silence ends." Captain Helion fell to his knees, eyes wide with terror and awe. "My lord, what would you have of us?" The figure's gaze pierced through him. "Remember what I was. Remember why I wept." Then the chamber erupted. Light and darkness collided, folding into one another like waves of creation. When it cleared, the figure was gone, and in his place a trail of blood led out of the throne room, each step echoing like thunder. Across the Sol system, fleets reeled. Warp drives screamed as the Astronomicon fractured into two beams, one blinding gold, one cold white. The Loyalists followed the gold. The Redeemed followed the white. Between them stretched a gulf of belief that no fleet could cross without burning. In that gulf drifted millions of voices praying for clarity, and hearing nothing but their own doubts reflected back. On Luna, Seraphine watched the glow of Terra ripple like a wound. The storm had reached the moon's horizon, carving symbols of fire into the dust. "It's begun," she whispered. Her sisters prepared for battle, but she raised her hand. "No, we do not fight him." The others stared. "Then what do we fight?" She looked at the sky, where gold and white light intertwined. "Ourselves." The first sign of the Emperor's return was not triumph, it was madness. The faithful began to speak in tongues, their eyes filled with visions of impossible futures. Cities burned without flame, as if memory itself had caught fire. On Forge worlds, machines began to dream. On Shrine worlds, statues bled. Everywhere, reality frayed like parchment under divine touch. In the void above Mars, the vigilant oath floated toward Terra's orbit. Captain Leontis stood at the observation deck, his armor blackened, his banner torn. His ship's vox crackled with fragments of a new gospel. The Emperor walks again. The Emperor bleeds. The Emperor forgives. He turned to his chaplain. "If he forgives," Leontis said quietly, "then what becomes of men like us?" The chaplain smiled through cracked lips. "We vanish. Like smoke after a prayer." The ship descended into the light. Its hull melted. The crew sang as they burned, and from the ash something rose, not of flesh or steel, but will. The oath they had sworn lived on, echoing across the warp as a vow unbroken. "We will see him, even if it kills us." Beneath the palace, in the catacombs of saints, Confessor Mailer led the redeemed in silent procession. Their bodies glowed faintly, eyes reflecting both terror and tenderness. They had come not to fight, but to bear witness. The corridors trembled as the sound of footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, ancient. Mailer fell to his knees as the air turned golden. "My lord," he whispered, "what are you?" The light dimmed, revealing a figure cloaked in tattered robes. The Emperor's face was no longer a statue's perfection. It was human, lined with sorrow, eyes burning with mortal clarity. "Once I was a man," he said. "Then they made me their god. Now I am their consequence." Maelor reached out, tears falling. "Then end this suffering." The Emperor's gaze softened. "I cannot. Only they can." Above them, war erupted. The gold and white fleets clashed in orbit, fire and prayer tearing the void apart. Bolters spoke hymns, plasma cannons screamed litanies. Angels of death fell like comets. In the midst of it all, Terra's atmosphere split, and through it descended a spear of light, as if heaven itself had decided to strike. It was not a weapon, but a messenger. When it struck the ground, the world trembled. Seraphine and her sisters felt the shockwave ripple through their bones. She raised her blade, ready to face what came, but when the dust cleared, she saw not an enemy, but a child standing within the crater, glowing faintly, her eyes the color of dawn. "He sent me," the girl said. Her voice was calm, yet carried the weight of galaxies. "To ask if you still believe." Seraphine lowered her weapon. "In him?" she asked. The girl shook her head. "In mercy." For the first time in years, Seraphine's armor felt unbearably heavy. She sank to her knees. Around her, the storm stilled, as though listening. "Yes," she said at last, "even if it destroys us." The child smiled. "It already has." In the palace above, the Emperor walked through the halls of his own divinity. Each step left behind a memory, the laughter of a child from ancient Terra, the cry of a soldier dying for his dream, the whisper of a mother praying for her son. All of it returned to him now, every forgotten act of love buried beneath millennia of war. "You wanted eternity," he said to the ghosts that followed him, "and so I gave you endless sorrow." He reached the gates of the throne chamber. Beyond them waited the custodians, loyal even as the world unraveled. Helion approached, tears streaking his face. "My Emperor," he said, voice shaking, "we are lost." The Emperor placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," he said softly, "you are found." Outside, the redeemed knelt. The loyalists halted their fire. Even the warp itself grew quiet, as if all of existence bowed in that single heartbeat. The Emperor raised his hands, one radiant gold, one scarred and blood-stained. From them poured light and shadow intertwined, spreading across Terra, then beyond, touching every soul that had ever called his name. It was not salvation. It was understanding. The light faded. When the survivors opened their eyes, the Emperor was gone. In his place stood only his armor, empty, gleaming faintly with warmth. The custodians wept. Maelor fell silent. Seraphine looked toward the stars and whispered, "He left again." The child beside her shook her head. "No, he became us." In the following days, the Imperium changed. The Astronomicon no longer burned with gold, but with soft silver, a light gentle enough to see the stars behind it. Wars ceased not from victory, but from exhaustion. The redeemed walked among the wounded, their glow fading as they gave their lives to heal. The faith that had once conquered worlds now knelt beside them, unsure, humble, human. And yet, peace did not feel like triumph. It felt like mourning. Statues of the Emperor remained, but now they bore two faces, one divine, one mortal. Temples reopened not to command, but to remember. Every prayer began the same way. "Forgive us for forgetting you were one of us." In the deep void where the vigilant oath had burned, a faint echo lingered, the hum of voices bound by eternal service. In the warp, the Chaos Gods turned away, for the sound of mercy wounded them. And far beyond, where even light hesitated to go, a single heartbeat echoed still. Not of power, not of dominion, but of a man who had once dreamed of peace and finally, after 10,000 years, had become it. Terra slept beneath new skies. The war had ended, yet the galaxy held its breath, knowing that the quiet after divinity is never still for long. The stars flickered like candles in a cathedral, some fading, some reborn. And among them, unseen, the Emperor's voice lingered one last time. "I am no longer your God. I am your memory." Then silence returned. The storm was gone. But the echo of what it changed would outlast eternity. The galaxy drifted into silence. Not peace, silence. The kind that follows when the choir has ended, when the last candle gutters, when even the echoes forget what they were made from. The fires of Terra had dimmed, leaving only dust and reflection. The Emperor was gone, yet not gone. His absence filled the stars like a presence too vast to see. And so the Imperium endured, no longer shouting its faith into the void, but whispering it, softly, like prayer turned to memory. The throne lay empty, encased in glass and shadow. No one approached it now. The custodians stood at a distance, silent as statues, guarding not a god, but a tomb of light. They no longer prayed. They simply remembered. The hall around them was filled with the hum of dying machines, the slow hiss of incense burners that had not been refilled in years. Dust gathered where once banners hung. In the golden quiet, time moved differently, slower, heavier, as though it too had knelt. Seraphine wandered the ruins of the ecclesiarchal palace. Her armor, once polished to a mirror's gleam, was tarnished by age and ash. She no longer commanded armies, nor preached to the faithful. Her sword had become a staff, her voice a whisper. The child who had come from the heavens was gone, vanished into the mist of history. Yet Seraphine felt her presence sometimes in the warmth of sunlight through stained glass, or in the hush that followed the dawn prayers. Perhaps the girl had never been flesh at all. Perhaps she was only what hope looks like when it refuses to die. In the catacombs below, Confessor Maelor recorded the names of the fallen by hand, refusing the aid of servitors or machines. His ink was blood mixed with sanctified oil, his quill carved from the wing of a saint long forgotten. He wrote slowly, reverently, knowing that no one would ever read his work. Still, he wrote. "History," he said to the shadows, "is the only resurrection we have left." His voice trembled, breaking the silence of centuries. "And faith," he added, "is the only grave that never closes." On Mars, the forges sang their hymns in lower tones. The Mechanicus no longer spoke of divinity in steel. They spoke of memory instead, of the echo that lingered in the circuits of old machines. Some said the Omnissiah had returned to the machine spirit itself, diffused through every bolt, every wire, every whisper of plasma. In their temples, red-robed priests placed their hands on the warm hulls of starships and wept, feeling a pulse beneath the metal, faint but alive. It was not godhood. It was remembrance. On distant worlds, statues of the Emperor began to crumble, not from neglect, but from reverence too deep to preserve. Pilgrims came not to worship, but to listen, to place their ears against the marble feet and hear the silence within, the kind of silence that speaks more honestly than words. In that stillness they found something strange. Not command, not judgment, but peace. The redeemed faded one by one. Their glow diminished until they became indistinguishable from the rest of humanity. Some became teachers, healers, wanderers of broken worlds. Others simply disappeared, their last breath carrying whispers that sounded like prayer or wind or both. None left monuments. None were remembered by name, but their deeds lingered like the faint scent of incense after the altar is cleared. Captain Hellion, older now, scarred and half-machine, stood at the edge of a starship docked above Terra. The stars stretched endlessly, fragile as candlelight. He watched them flicker and thought of the Emperor's final words. "I am no longer your god. I am your memory." The words haunted him, not as loss, but as freedom. He wondered what it meant to serve without worship, to live without the shadow of eternity pressing down. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he turned away and began the long descent to the surface below. Terra had changed. Its towers had grown softer, its people quieter. No longer did the streets echo with sermons or the crack of whips. Children played in the ruins of old cathedrals, their laughter echoing where once there had been hymns. The faith had not died. It had become something simpler, smaller, and perhaps purer. They no longer prayed for victory. They prayed for understanding. In the dead heart of the throne, a single figure sat in the dust. Seraphine. Her hair, once the color of blood and flame, was white as salt. Her eyes, though dimmed, still burned with something unbroken. She placed her hand on the cold metal of the throne's base. "We carried you as a god," she said softly, "but maybe you only ever wanted to be a man." Her voice trembled. Maybe that was always the test. Not of faith, but of mercy. The golden walls shimmered faintly. For a moment she thought she heard breathing, the faint inhale of something vast, eternal, and sleeping. But it was only the wind moving through the cracks in the throne's surface. She closed her eyes. "If you can hear me," she whispered. "We've finally learned to listen." The warp, once howling with gods and madness, had thinned to a whisper. Some said the ruinous powers had turned inward, devouring themselves in despair. Others believed they had never existed at all, that they were only the dreams of a species too afraid of its own reflection. Whatever truth remained, no one spoke it aloud. Truth, like faith, was sacred only in silence. In time, the stars began to fade, not all at once, but gently, as if exhaling. Humanity spread slowly, quietly, building not empires, but sanctuaries. The imperial creed became a story, then a legend, then a song sung by travelers under dying suns. And in those songs, the emperor was not a tyrant nor a savior, but a memory of what mankind had once believed it could be. Mailer's final entry was found centuries later, etched into a shard of glass. The emperor did not save us. He reminded us that we were worth saving ourselves. The words glowed faintly when touched, as though remembering the warmth of the hand that wrote them. A remembrancer, nameless, faceless, wrote the last chronicles of this age. His ink was starlight, his pen, the wing of a lost seraph. He did not write for praise, nor for truth. He wrote because silence, left unguarded, forgets. And in his closing lines, he posed a question not meant to be answered. What is faith when the God you worship becomes mortal? And what is humanity when mortality itself becomes divine? He laid his pen aside, the echo of the emperor's words lingering in his mind like the toll of a distant bell. Then he closed the tome, sealing within it the last breath of an age. Beyond the window, the stars flickered like candles in a cathedral that stretched forever. One went out, another was born, and somewhere, unseen, something vast and kind smiled. The galaxy turned, and so ended the age of the Imperium, not with apocalypse, not with conquest, but with a whisper, a prayer, a memory. If this story stirred something in you, like, share, and subscribe, so that others too may remember. And in the comments below, tell me, what do you believe still lives in the silence after God's fall?